This week on the 77% Street Debate.
Men ordinarily show love through giving. I don't know any other way to show love.
If you don't provide, you don't have a voice in your family.
Yeah.
You don't have authority. You cannot make decisions.
We do not really have people that we can go back to and say, dude, if we're having a beer, let's put this beer aside. Today, let's open our chests and just put it out there that this is what I'm going through.
Even from the beginning of my childhood, you have to be a leader as a man.
The 77% is in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, and here we're going to have a very special debate, speaking to men about what it means to be a man in Africa in this year of 2021. I'm very interested about this one, so let's get right to it. We'll start with Mr. Onyango Otieno, Double O. He is a trauma therapist, we would say, yeah? But I just wanted to start with, definitions. How would you define manhood in your life, in your world?
For me, manhood is simply me existing as myself, as opposed to the social scripts that have been written for what masculinity is supposed to stand for. And that essentially means going against the grain for most parts, because again, being in Africa, we had from childhood perceptions about who a man is supposed to be, who a boy must be.
Yeah, talk to me about those perceptions. What were they? What are they to this day?
It emanates from things to do with how to hold on to your emotions, because you're not supposed to cry as a guy. It's weird for you to be expressive if you feel that you are struggling with your emotions. It's weird for you to also stand for women's rights. And for people who want to live differently, it's almost like you're lynched socially as a person.
I want to hear from Oscar, because you're actually of a very different viewpoint, coming from a very traditional background. Do you believe that what he's saying is correct, that manhood is still stuck in sort of the olden days where men were expected to be sort of hunters and gatherers?
I think so, and I think it should remain that way.
You think it should remain that way?
Yes, I think, in my view, the way I was raised, right, the man has always been the dominant force in the house, or the provider, the head of the house. If we give, like, the opposite sex,
You mean women?
Women, yes, sorry. If we give them the, let's say, the mantra to run the family, I think we play different roles, so they won't be able to perform it well, as much as they do. So
should I assume then that in your home, you're the man, as you've described?
Yes.
Where does that leave your wife then, or your partner?
She has her role to play. She's my partner.
She's your partner.
She backs me up.
Okay.
Yes.
Justin, let me hear from you, because you're one of the young people we have on this panel. Which way do you fall here? Where do you think masculinity is in your world?
For me, being a man is being a leader, being somebody who is thinking not just for himself, because at first you're supposed to be the provider, and you're supposed to be the person who's taking the way and working even harder, trying to provide for even your siblings, as I am the second born in my family. So being part of a family system where I have to take care of other people, even from the beginning of my childhood, you have to be a leader as a man.
Let me speak to Charles at the back there, because you're actually running a program called Man Enough. What are some of the things that you're teaching people about manhood? Is it what Oscar is saying, that, look, we need to be hunters, gatherers, the men in the home, or is it something more nuanced, like what Onyango is describing?
I don't know when we say hunters and gatherers, where if it is in the literal sense or gathering in the sense of hustling for some money or, upkeep in the family. But having said that, in what I do, talking to men, young men and old men in equal measure, a real man, let me add that word there, real. A real man is this male figure who takes initiative to live responsibly, to love faithfully, and ultimately when he does all this to stand, he leaves a legacy. First, he knows that he has the attributes that are typically male. Then, after that, he realizes that he's male, but he doesn't have to really put it out there that I am a man. You'll have to know that I am a man. Because, when you have to prove something, in my interpretation, it means that thing is in doubt. So for me, if I have to tell people that I'm a man, or you'll see that I am a man, it means it is in doubt.
Okay,
Yeah.
I want to hear from Eric, because it sounds to me like there's an incredible amount of pressure on this idea of manhood, because we're talking about things like leadership, we've heard, authority, faithfulness, love. It just sounds like it's too much.
It is too much. If you're being honest, the roles used to be quite clear in the yesteryears, so that a man's role was to bring bacon, right? And then the woman would cook it. But now we have women who have hog houses with pigs in them, and they are... No, really, they do. And so the role of a man has become quite nebulous now. A typical picture, you're married, and she has, in most cases, more money than you. And so you're trying to argue your manhood, which in a lot of African society entails that you provide and protect. But you are 300,000 shillings shy of what she brings every week.
Okay, well, let me ask Charles on the other side. He's a father of 3, and he's actually in a unique household where your wife is a breadwinner. Yeah? So when you hear about these ideas of provision, in order for you to be a man, you have to provide. How does that make you feel?
It's stressing because I'm still expecting to, as an African man, to provide.
By the way, when you tell people that my wife is earning more than me, how do they usually take it?
They don't take it lightly. They say that I'm not man enough. So it's really, really stressing.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, Oscar, I want to hear from you. Do you think that Charles is man enough? Because you said, provision is definitely one of the key things or key characteristics of manhood. Yeah.
Yes. I think he's right. Because in the end, you have to provide. And nowadays, it's different from way back when it was easier. The roles were clearly defined, and it was easier for a man to be a man. Right now, it's really hard because there's a lot of factors in being a man nowadays.
All right, I really want to talk about provision because it keeps coming back. So, Eric, when you're not providing, are you still a man?
Men ordinarily show love through giving. I don't know any other way to show love. There seems to be a mismatch between women and men as it pertains to provision, so that a woman has very elaborate dreams. She wants a house on a hill and shoes every week, and the man on the other side doesn't quite have his ducks in a row as it pertains to money. He can only afford so much. So then there is a mismatch. He comes home with the bread, that which he can provide, and she's thinking, my hair hasn't been done for 5 weeks, and what kind of a man are you? And then there's friction right there. It's like, you are not seeing the bread I brought. I'm doing the best I can. And she's like, look at Geoffrey. Your friend has a car and 2 other cars for his wife. What are you doing? Why can't you talk to Geoffrey? So he takes you to places he get money.
Okay.
Yeah. Did I marry a placenta, or did I marry a man? And then it becomes difficult.
Samuel, let's come to you, because I saw you shaking your head when Eric was speaking. Are you also experiencing this, where you're getting incredible pressure from women to finance their lives because this is what a man is expected to do?
Yeah. First of all, as I said, a man shows love through giving.
Is this true,
That's
by
fair.
the way? Is that how you show? I just want to do a quick check. Is this true? If it is true, raise your hand. I show love through giving money or buying stuff?
Giving, not necessarily money.
Not
but
necessarily,
giving.
but giving.
Yes.
Okay, Samuel, let's continue with you.
So, since back then, even today, we have to provide for our loved ones, for our ladies and stuff like that. You won't expect a woman to provide for you. But in this day and time, yes, we have to be as one.
Okay, so I keep hearing this idea of the African context, the African setup. How does it differ? How are European men, for example, different from African men? Let's come back to you, Onyango.
I want to say I don't know.
You don't know?
Yeah, because I can only define myself with my environment.
Yeah.
You
But why does the African setup have so much to do with the kind of man that you become?
I mean, with the way our societies were structured before we were disrupted by colonialism and all that, we almost accepted that as the way to be, because by then, women still didn't have the voices we might think they have today, right? The concept of African masculinity, for me, it's still very much a perception because we can't clearly define it. What is it?
Yeah.
You know, we don't know, like, what is it? Because we exist in very different textures, very different communities, very different beliefs as well. So there's no one African man, there are no African men. It's just people living in very diverse dynamics, and we have to appreciate that.
Okay, speak to me about, because I can only speak to you from the experience of a girl and how society views us. What about you?
I am one of 3 brothers. We were raised by my mom and my dad. We're vastly different people, right? I'm the more expressive. I gesture when I talk. I speak, I cry, I talk about things. I run campaigns on cervical cancer and where men need to be involved in it. So I, as everybody else here is, we are a reflection of our own upbringing. So I love my upbringing because I went through very many phases, right? I went through phases where we're talking about I didn't feel man enough. I didn't feel man enough in 20 ways, right? Didn't feel man enough because at some point I wasn't tall enough. Didn't feel man enough because I hadn't gone to the gym enough. I didn't feel man enough because my voice wasn't deep enough. I didn't feel man enough because suddenly when I got into relationships and talk about things like having sex, and you actually want to be like kind and respectful in things like sex and relationships, and people tell you you're being a pussy, outrightly that's what you're being told, right? And you're being told that if you care, that's not manly, be the real man. So ultimately, my bigger thing is, what if you're trying to define masculinity, it's your own individual expression of who you are, but a responsible expression of who you are that is not harmful to the people around you.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so what are the challenges then that ordinary men, contemporary men are experiencing in a world like today's? Eric, I want to hear from you.
Things like infertility cause mental health. Nobody here amongst us as men would bring it up and say, oh, I have this issue. So it's always in the hush-hush. Financial abuse is another thing. Men face it every day. Nobody talks about it from the women they're dating, right? And things like physical abuse as well. You would not proudly say with your chest all out that I was slapped by my wife last night, and she's super strong. She choke-held me for an hour, and I couldn't scream because everybody would walk in and say what was going on in here. So I think these are real issues that, again, we are one of the biggest enemies as men, because if I called Toithi and said, hey, you know what, I have an issue, man. I went to the doctor and he's given me a not so pleasant report about my inability to give my wife a baby. He wouldn't know what to do most of the time because men are supposed to exercise stoicism. So he'd be like, grab a beer and, oh, did you see what Messi did? I'm like, I am empty.
Yeah.
Something is happening here, right?
Yeah.
And that would be the end of the story. So I think to just urge a man who's watching to be more participatory in terms of the things that we suffer. So that if somebody reaches out to you about a challenge that is manly that they suffer, you pay better listening ear and attention, I think.
All right.
We could start with ourselves before we elect women to do that for us.
Excellent. Justin, are you talking to each other in your group of friends, in your circle, or are you doing what Eric is describing here? You just grab a beer and you're like, yeah, you're going to be fine, bro.
That is totally true. That is exactly what happens. And it's hard for us to express ourselves, even emotionally. I like what he has said, how he's expressive and he expresses what he's feeling, but maybe he's not doing it to somebody else. Maybe it's just himself in a corner, crying it out, thinking about the pain that he's going through because he can't express it to somebody else. Because as a man, you're expected to have it inside you, to get a hold of it. As he has said, just grab a beer, talk about football, and you forget about it.
Yeah.
But it's not really that easy.
I want to hear from Oscar because we're now talking about themes like mental health. Where does that fall in your very traditional viewpoint of what manhood should be?
In the end, men are still human. We still suffer from the same things that the women suffer from, only on our side, right? Yeah. The way we've been raised, I tend to think Africans are a bit conservative. We are actually afraid of talking about such sensitive issues, because if you're free about it, if you talk about it, then you're branded, you're too soft, Some people think you're not a man, and you're clearly suffering.
All right, let me hear from Bruce, because you're now speaking to a new generation. How do you invite language that allows children to speak openly about such issues, especially when they're so young, age-appropriate conversations about manhood, toxic masculinity, what it means to be a woman?
Everyone kind of speaks from the context of how they were raised. So you find, in as much as you could be trying to teach me something, for as long as I was given a boundary of how I should be, I find it very difficult to move away from it. So I think what I just try to encourage fellow dads, and it's symbiotic, is just to give your kids the room to be themselves and not really try to confine them, because you don't know how much that can have an impact on them tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, shockingly, Samuel, you have something to say to me. Go ahead.
We do have an issue of communications among ourselves. Men, we communicate differently than women.
If you communicate at
yes.
all.
So the way we speak among ourselves is quite different. And yes, I believe it's better for us to also speak out the things that we're going through. Personally, I'm a mental health advocate, and I usually advise most men to speak about it, because like recently I lost both my parents in a very short time, but I could easily speak about it, and now it helps me in a certain way. But most of us men, we do have an issue not to communicate about it properly. Most of us didn't have that time, or rather that ability to speak about certain things.
Okay, so talk to me about African fathers.
Yes.
How is the relationship between the average... Yeah, you're laughing. What's the relationship between you and your father? What was it?
With my father father was a true African man, like literally an African man. There are certain things we could not easily speak so comfortably with him. So our relationship wasn't that tight until later when I grew up. After now, I confronted him about a number of things, how he treated me as a child. So without that confrontation, we could have not been friends. And yes.
All right, Herbert, I see you nodding from the corner of your eye. I'm going to come to you. Is this also true for you, the relationship with your father? Talk to me about that.
Well, definitely with our African fathers, you have to make the effort. As the child and as the boy, you have to make the effort in that situation. You have to confront him and you have to show him that you've become a man.
Where is the confrontation coming in from?
Not a confrontation, it's in the situation of where you have to have a conversation with him. You understand? If you're going to have this conversation, you're the one to approach him. You're the one to stop him and tell him, yeah, Dad, we need to speak about this and that and this. If you don't get to do that, he will always look at you like you're still a child to him. You understand?
Yeah.
And that is something that cannot be done away with. That is something you have to do all the time, and you have to be able to speak to your children. I get it now. We are at this place where we are now the younger generation. We can instigate and we can start those conversations with our children. But at the same time, we still have to see them take the initiative.
All right. Charles, did you have something to say to me with regards to this?
I have something to say. If you don't provide, you don't have a voice in your family.
Yeah.
You don't have authority. You cannot make decisions. There are so many challenges facing us these days. In the past, a man was able to batter the wife, especially if the wife is the one that talks a lot. Yeah? And
by the way, we're not advocating domestic violence.
Yes, of course I'm not advocating, but it used to be that way in the past.
Yeah.
The situation right now, men are in that fear that you cannot, there's no way you can go and express yourself because they don't have peer groups where they can share.
Right.
Yeah. When you go to the police will laugh at you. They'll tell you what kind of a man are you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in fact, they can even tell you, go and beat her instead of coming to the police.
Yeah.
No. And most of the institutions that are there, advocating institutions, they are focused on women's rights, but not men's rights. So men are suffering in silence. And that's why even if you look at the statistics that are there, men who are committing suicide, there are so many. Because they have nowhere where they can ventilate.
Yeah. Okay, so two things are coming out very clearly here. And Charles, I want to come to you, that provision and power is a very big factor of masculinity, and now it appears sexuality as well. But talking back to those negative effects, when men are not talking to each other, you're not talking to your fathers, what do you do?
You know, for a man to open up, even to his spouse, he has to feel the atmosphere has a lot of trust and that he will not be judged if he speaks about what is going on. Not just out there, but even in our own homes, where your wife typically also has grown in an environment where the dad never used to talk about anything, and that is the male reference she has. So when even her husband tries to talk about such things, even her, she somehow vilifies.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it is a common denominator, but it happens. It happens. We do not really have people that we can go back to and say, dude, if we're having a beer, let's put this beer aside. Today, let's open our chests and just put it out there that this is what I'm going through.
Is it true what Charles said, that most men don't really have friends?
It's a hit, and for me, I think not really,
Yeah.
because myself, I do have friends that we talk a lot about, as in not just drinking, soccer, and other things, right? But I feel that pressure, it comes from childhood.
Okay.
That's why I can't tell him I have no money, because maybe he has more money than me. Then he'll judge me. I'm afraid he'll judge me.
Right.
Or he'll say,
And that is why I say men don't have friends. If you feel like this guy will judge you as a result of you speaking about your weakness, then that disqualifies him as your friend. That was my point.
You don't really have friends if you're afraid to tell them something out of judgment. Yeah. Samuel?
There's one point he said very clearly, but we haven't talked about it, the sexual part. Mostly if you can't satisfy your wife, your girlfriend, sexually, you're not considered as a man. Because most of them, they'll start either talking about it with their friends and then saying it's not man enough. Yes, you have money, but still you can't satisfy her sexually. So what do you want? So the issue is we have a lot of pressure that we have to handle to balance each one of them.
All right, so a lot of pressure. We keep coming back to that word, pressure, 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 but there is no outlet.
Yes.
So what are the consequences?
There are so many people who are committing suicide. We are families that are breaking. Some are ventilating through violence. Gender-based violence is on the increase. So those are some of the consequences.
Yeah.
And as my namesake was putting it, Charles, we have buddies, but we don't have friends. And by that, I think I would like to say we don't have people whom we can confide confidential issues and sensitive issues that affect us internally, that who can also help us cope with them or find solution. So we have buddies, but don't have friends.
Right.
So I want to agree with him too.
All right. I'd like to hear some solutions, please. Let's start with the two gentlemen at the back. How do we ensure that a year from now, 2 years from now, we're not having the same conversation? You know, we're not talking about manhood in this very not positive way.
I would say, first of all, we advocate more men to start speaking out of their issues, and the aspect, that part of how women can be also allies is first stop dating your father. So in the essence that you were brought up by a certain element of a man, and you want also your man to be that.
Yeah.
No, this is your man on a different aspect. That was your mother's man. So stop dating your mother's man. Date your man. You put this person on the same level that you.
So updating our expectations also of the kind of men we want in our lives.
So that at least you're okay with the person you have at the moment.
Okay.
Yes.
Charles, give me some solutions, please.
Men should speak out openly. Men should have their own peer groups where they can come and discuss issues that affect them openly, without fear. And for women to be more allies, men also should understand that at some point, like, for example, the situation we are facing now, COVID-19, people have lost their jobs, business have gone down. Yeah? They should just keep on respecting their husbands, obeying them, being submissive. And by being submissive, I mean, to an extent that they don't even deny them their conjugal right. Because when it comes that now you cannot provide, even it is limited, the conjugal right is limited, which is wrong. So.
Okay, no, I understand what you're I understand what you mean.
Yes.
Okay, can we get some other solutions, please? So Charles.
Mentorship. Children, especially boys, they become the men they see around them. If there are no men around them, they will borrow from the closest thing that they see around them, that they think that is what defines masculinity. If it is TV, that's where they'll borrow it from. If it is rap music, rap video, that's where they'll borrow from. So now, in many years to come, but now starting from now, we have to make a deliberate decision and choices to talk to our kids. Not because of the way we feel that this is what defines masculinity, but helping them to realize how to just be a responsible person around other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Mariga, let's close with you, finally.
Redefine who you are. It's a normal and an ordinary thing, and become the best version of yourself. Don't hold on to a version of yourself you were taught. There's nothing natural about how we are. Everything about us, we're not naturally A, B, or C. All of this is nurture and what we allow among ourselves. Redefine yourselves as much as you can to the best version of yourself. Free yourself.
All right. Oh, I really like that. Free yourself. I guess that's where we're going to wrap this conversation. I've really had a good time speaking to all the men. What a privilege. And I have to admit, I'm so happy to be a woman today. I don't know how you feel, but thanks for watching.